which of the items might be take-home risks? Take-home pollutants?
Second-hand smoke.
Secondhand smoke was one. Asbestos, if we're working on a job site and bring our on the bottom of our boots. A lot of folks take their shoes off at the door. I would love to say my family had made that transition. We just hadn't. We still traipse through the house with our shoes. No time. My son was making up his bed the other day, my 9-year-old. That's an act of Congress to be sure that happens, but he was with his shoes on, walking all over his pillows, and I about lost it. I said, son, you were just outside, there's probably dog poop out there. You walked through, and just because you don't see it on your shoe doesn't mean there's not residue there, and then that's the little pillow you're going to lay your head on. You know, he's just over his head. He just didn't seem to care. He's very aloof. I guess a 9-year-old wouldn't care. We can get the potential consequences of that. But really, it's a good example of we do bring things in on our shoes, on our clothes. VOCs, right? The hairspray we put on, the aerosols. Pesticides that we spray. We saw the example earlier about the home and the rodents, the pests that we can spray. That's a potential problem as well. Pet dander. Yep. Yeah, for groomers, pet dander. People that work in nail shops, nail salons, lots of chemicals that they could bring home on their clothes. So it's not just things that emerge from the home or from the structure, but we can certainly bring things in. So there's kind of a 4 ways of thinking about. A lot of ways to think about, but this is one particular model that can help us think. What are things that kill quick? Carbon monoxide can kill us quickly. Things that can kill lots of people. Tobacco smoke, radon, both kill lots of people. What are things that cause serious impairments, but that don't necessarily kill? Lead and asbestos are 2 of those things. And what are things that just might cause irritation or discomfort, might make us feel badly, cause us to miss some work? Those would be things like mold, mildew, volatile organic compounds, or dust mites. Lots of those, that itchy throat you've got, and you just think, oh, it's the weather changing. Well, it actually could be something related to your indoor environment. So we've talked a little bit about this, that a healthy home is one that's designed, constructed, maintained, or rehabilitated in a manner that prevents diseases and injuries that result from housing-related hazards. And so we want to think in the design phase of what we can do to create a safe and healthy home, but then most of us are going to move into homes that have been built. We didn't build or design, so we need to think about what it is we bring in, what are the redesign measures that we could take, what types of furniture do we take. We'll talk about this in a minute too. I think it's one of the examples later in terms of take-home hazards. The dry cleaning. So did you know that the dry cleaning solutions that those companies use have toxins in them? And so one of the recommendations, a simple recommendation, is to simply take the plastic off before you walk in the house and just shake it out. Doesn't take a lot of extra time. You got to take that plastic off anyway, so just take it off real quick outside. Preferably, if you have an enclosed garage, don't do it there either. But if you've got an open air carport, that should be fine. These are just habits that you can start to reform, as opposed to, again, with the laundry. Just don't wait till you get inside to your closet to open it up, because then that stuff's confined and compressed into the bedroom. Do it outside. So I've already shown y'all this and gone through the consumer guide that you have. The other booklet is, as I said, also is a bit bigger and more robust. You've got lots of information in the bigger stakeholder guide that you can look for. But this is a really great booklet for you to think about using with patients that you might work with. We can get you more of these, but you also can print them off if you just wanted to print them and stake on them. That's a pretty quick and easy way. We happen to have grant funding right now to print some. Printing them is kind of pricey. But, might be that if you call in the future, we might have to say, you're going to have to print them off. Sorry, but right now we're in good shape. So the 8 principles of healthy homes, which we've already rehearsed once, we're gonna rehearse it again. Keep it dry, keep it clean, keep it safe, keep it well ventilated, keep it pest free, keep it contaminant free, keep it well maintained, and keep it thermally controlled. All right, so we'll walk through how does indoor air quality relate to those principles of healthy housing. Indoor air contaminants can come from any of these sources: biological contaminants, the combustion byproducts, the radon, the asbestos, lead, paint dust, secondhand smoke, formaldehyde, and volatile organic compounds. So let's talk first about biological contaminants, or dust mites particularly. They're too small to be seen, but they are found everywhere. There's no way to fully eliminate them. They live on dead skin cells. So one of the reasons that we recommend that it's very important to wash your sheets in hot water at least once a week is because we need to kill dust mites. If we don't, we have them potentially living in the bed with us, and that's they're sloughing off skin cells. Y'all probably know the skin cell and how much. What? Okay, nurses, tell me. I don't know the answer to this. Not a trick question. How many skin cells do we lose a day?
A lot.
A lot? Yeah, it's a lot. Yeah. Okay. So it's not like I should know that then. If the nurses don't know it, I'm probably in good
We may
shape.
have known it one time, but it was a long time
That's
ago.
right. Sort of like the Krebs cycle or
That's
something, right?
Yeah.
Who really hangs on to that stuff. They live on dead skin cells. They're found. So this is another piece, particularly for children with asthma, that you may be taking care of. They live on. If you have a stuffed animal, you're probably keeping it close to your skin, so you can have that close to your skin, sloughing off skin cells, dust mites living on the stuffed animal, the kids continuing to hold the stuffed animal, so they're getting more and more exposure to dust mites. That's a problem. But did you know that if you freeze, not only are dust mites killed by the heat from a washer, they're also killed by being frozen. So while we would prefer that families not introduce stuffed animals at all, we can recommend for those who have a fairly strong attachment to their stuffed animal, freeze it. By freezing the stuffed animal overnight, you kill the dust mites, and do that fairly frequently, particularly for children who have asthma or who may be sensitive to asthma as a risk. Have y'all heard that before? Another thing for those who have asthma is find a smooth mattress cover and a smooth pillow cover, because again, the skin cells sloughing off into not just the mattress cover or the pillow cover, pillowcase, but also they go beneath that into the pillow itself. So this protects the pillow from absorbing those skin cells and being a home and a haven for the dust mites.
But when you freeze it, would you still not need to wash it to get rid of the dead mites?
They don't wash well, and so the dead mites are. That's not what's recommended. It's not what has come down from AAP in terms of recommendations. I thought that as well. I don't know the reason for that. You know, if you wash it, they're going to get all like lumpy and humpy and. So the major action steps, the big picture, kind of upstream intervention on dust mites is keep the humidity in your home as low as possible. In the summertime, that means running your air conditioner or keeping your dehumidifier going. To keep your house clean, use a damp, clean cloth to avoid airborne dust particles. So don't just dry sweep, but actually use a wet mop to clean your floor, because when you sweep, you're storing up the dust. Control your clutter. Wash and dry your bedding at least once a week, and use allergen-proof mattresses, box springs, and pillow covers as well. So we've got a sample of some of those up here that you can look at. The pillow covers are fairly inexpensive. The mattress covers are not that inexpensive. They're actually quite pricey. But the pillowcases are pretty cheap, and you can recommend those. purchased online on Amazon or Walmart, not too cost prohibitive. So again, vacuuming is really important. A HEPA vacuum or a HEPA filter is really a critical piece. That is it's a special type of filter that will prevent those particles from them being dispersed out after you vacuum them up. So you'll want to look for that. They're a little pricey, so it's not something that your limited resource audiences or limited resource families are going to be able to just run out and get. But if you are in the market for a new vacuum cleaner, it's something that people can be. In fact, about 2 years ago, I was looking, we needed a new vacuum cleaner, and I'd been teaching this for a couple years, and so we took the plunge and have a filter vacuum. It's not something that you expect people to go out and just make the purchase the first time they hear it, but can set the stage for them to think about it. Next, mold is one of the biological contaminants. This is such a huge issue in Mississippi. And the best strategy to address mold is to dehumidify your house, to keep it dry. Just don't want that extra moisture sitting around. It needs moisture to grow. It lives anywhere that there is a bunch of moisture that is kind of just sat there. That's what allows the moisture to continue, the mold to continue to grow. It's never possible to get rid of all mold in a house. You're going to always have some residual mold. They're spores, and they just you can't see them, but you do need to clean them. I'll get to this in a minute about mold myths, but I can't say it too many times that you don't need to test for mold. People call Extension all the time. I get probably a dozen calls a year. People wanting to know about testing for black mold. Mold is mold is mold is mold is mold. If you see it, you got it, and it needs to be eradicated. So no need to go, and you'll find that people take advantage of the myths. Marketers take advantage of the myths, and they sell mold test kits in Lowe's and places like that. But it's not going to give you any information that you don't already have, which is, I've got mold. And I need to get rid of it. So yeah, did I see a hand somewhere? No. Molds are fungi, so are yeast and mushrooms. They're nature's recycler. They live everywhere, like I said. There are some that live outside, some that live inside. They release tiny spores. The spores travel in the air, and then they can settle on surfaces. Again, you're not going to get rid of it all because it's just going to be there. But we can control it. We can't eradicate it, but we can control it. It grows when the conditions are just right. It becomes a problem for us when colonies grow in places we don't want them, like our homes. So it's a fuzzy science. Nice laughing. That's unintended. Fuzzy science. It depends on our level of exposure as well as our predisposure to be sensitive to mold. It can affect our allergies, it can affect asthma, it can cause weakened immunity, and it certainly, those who have weakened immunity can be more sensitive to it. It mostly affects children and older adults, so those of us in this room are not going to be that terribly affected by it. And it also depends on the type of mold as to how it might affect our health. So some people may have, an allergist would be able to get to the bottom of this, what type of mold it is and how a person's sensitivities may play into that. So we're not going to all be sensitive to all types of mold in all the same ways. So many different variables or factors that play into that. So toxic mold is really a misnomer. There is no such thing. It can affect us differently. The different types of mold can produce a toxic substance called a mycotoxin in some conditions. And the exposure pathways for those are ingestion, skin contact, and inhalation of the released spores. And then these are the ways that it gets to us and can affect our health. It has been shown, it does have a clear, even though the science is fuzzy and it's we don't know all the different pathways and the types and all the ways that it affects us. We do know that it does affect our health. We do have allergic reactions, and they can lead to things like allergic rhinitis, asthma, hypersensitivity, mitis, and infectious diseases, but they are rare. Immunosuppressed persons would be ones that would be more likely to have some sort of an infectious disease related to it, and from bird and bat droppings. Isn't that a lovely thought? Some of the toxic effects would be fatigue, respiratory issues, neurologic effects, suppression of the immune system, and organic dust toxic syndrome. The different types of mold you'll see here, they vary, and I'm not going to go into all this again. You're going to have all these slides. I don't think any of you are going to be looking under a microscope trying to identify what types of mold people have and how it's affected them. You can see that they vary, and that's the point of these slides, to show you that there's so many different types. That's just 6 examples of different types of mold. The clues to control mold are, we know that mold spores are present. There's a temperature range that can affect our exposure, or the growth of the mold. Mold grows on food, so one of the reasons it's important for us to wash our vegetables is, in addition to getting rid of bacteria, mold can affect food. And cheese, right? So if you think, I grew up thinking that there was mold on the end of cheese, that cut that piece off, and you can go to town grating it and use it. Well, actually, I've learned in recent years that that's not the case, that there's mold on the cheese, that those spores could be anywhere else on that cheese and just not noticeable to us. So if you find mold on food, you really need to trash it right away, because it can be problematic for our health. And the only one way that we can really reasonably control mold is through temperature control and moisture control. So the keys to keep our house, to keep the indoor environment with less than 70% relative humidity, really aim for 60%. You want to keep it below 18% in wood. You want to rapidly, if you have a flood, you want to rapidly dry out your house. It's important not to think that you can just do it right away yourself. Call a company like ServiceMaster, Service Pro, Paul Davis, those kinds of companies that come in and do the remediation, so that you can better determine, are you going to be able to get out of your house. Now, you can buy, if you have a flood and you want to kind of, in your home, you got maybe a bathroom that's overflowed, toilet's overflowed, and you want to get a sense for how bad does it seem, you can use a moisture meter, which we have here for you to look at, and you just hold it against the wall and it senses what is the level of moisture in a surface. If you put it up against your hand, it's going to go crazy, because our bodies are a lot of water in our bodies. Put it up against the wall, or it's going to have a little bit more moisture in a porous surface like sheetrock than you would hardwood. Maybe a little more in pine wood than you would oak, because it's more porous. And then you want to, if you're building a house, this is beyond what we can do in a clinical setting, but if you're building a house, look at water managed building assemblies like drainer. So in a bathroom, oftentimes you'll see them built with sheetrock up top, but then they might have what's it called, the wainscoting, the sort of paneling on the bottom, because that can be easily ripped off and dried out should there be a flood, the bathtub or the toilet overflowing. Dry it out really quickly and then just easily tacked back up with just a little bit of painting left. Whereas the sheetrock, it's porous, and so it pulls the water up. And determining, and you can use a moisture meter to determine where, what point did the water stop, and then you can re-mud, put new sheetrock down, re-mud. But it becomes a lot more difficult. It's just not going to seep up wood paneling, wainscoting in the way that it would sheetrock. So again, more than you can deal with in a clinical setting, but it's important to know these things. So keeping it dry, keeping the house dry. One of the principles of healthy homes, our goal is to keep our homes dry, keep our indoor environments dry for reasons that we've already talked about. In a home, you'd want to identify excess moisture sources. One thing in this bathroom that's really not recommended is having carpet adjacent to your bathtub. That just seems like a recipe for disaster over and over and over again. A good harbor for mold, and that, yeah, I don't think that's a great plan. You see here that the shingles are not laid down, so moisture can, even though you think that the moisture can't go up, it can. Our rain, as I said earlier, doesn't come just straight down. It blows depending on other weather conditions. Here you see that the water is obviously, in the middle picture, water is leaked and you've got a moisture issue behind the sink. So you may encounter lots of other examples here of potential problems. You may, in a clinical setting, encounter patients coming back who just don't have a sense for what's causing them to continue to have that, what they, in Mississippi, we like to say, I got a sinus infection, and that could be anything that resembles a sore throat and a runny nose, and could be something like this. And so it's just an opportunity. It's an opportunity here for you to think about what are these other environmental exposures that could be leading to this quote-unquote sinus infection that everybody thinks they have when they can't, when their throat hurts and they got a little cough and they got a little runny nose. So mold happens when we have wet materials from flooding, leaks, or wicking. That wicking is that idea that the water just kind of seeps up, particularly the sheetrock. When we have a dirty or wet air conditioner, when we see sweating cold surfaces, when we see humid air and dampness, it can happen behind vinyl wallpaper or other vapor barrier materials. So old vinyl wallpaper is not recommended because it doesn't allow for breathing. Water, the moisture can't dry, and mold can live behind there. We know the one thing that we know is required for mold to live is moisture to live and thrive. As I said, we're not going to ever get rid of it fully, but for it to thrive and to be at the level that it's going to have a problematic effect on our health, it's got to be moist. So if we can keep our moisture under control in our house, we can keep our mold under control. So let's take a step back to high school physics, which, full disclosure, I didn't even take high school physics, but this is sort of high school physics level information, understanding moisture. There's three forms of moisture: solid, ice, liquid, water, gas is a vapor. And so how does moisture move? If we're trying to control it, we need to know how it moves. Liquid water can defy gravity. It flows downward except when it does not. As I've said, it depends on the weather, it depends on the wind patterns. Lots of things can affect how water gets into our house and how it moves. These are some of the, except when it's not, functions: gravity, adhesion, wind, wicking, and hydrostatic pressure. So looking here, do you think that even though this seems like a solid surface, do you think water can't make a move into the house? It can, because it's actually porous. Brick is not actually solid, it's porous. And certainly the masonry, the cement in between is porous. Water can certainly get through that, and you see the guys pushing the water right at the wall. And a lot of businesses out there that advertise their pressure washing services, and so it is not actually a good idea to pressure wash your house, because again, it's pushing water straight into, at a high pressure, straight into the surface that you're spraying against. It sure does look nice when you walk out and you see that there's no mold or no mildew or no whatever it is you're wanting to get rid of from the side of the house, no dirt, but geez, is it worth the risk of getting water, introducing the moisture that could lead to the mold, that could lead, and so on and so forth. So look at other solutions like cleaning. It's not to say you can't use water on the side of your house. You can, just don't use that high pressure water. So we want to consider no brick, no mortar, brick, mortar, concrete, and wood with moisture like a sponge. It actually does pull through. So this is the other side of what we just saw here. This guy is pushing water through, and it actually is seeping through. Some more of the building construction science stuff here. And again, this is more building construction science stuff, which we'll zoom through, but I do want to just let you see it, know that you're going to get this in your slides. So water vapor moves by air transport and through diffusion of materials. Water moves from warm to cold, moisture moves from warm to cold and from more to less. And so if you've seen a puddle of water, what does it do? It dissipates out from more, where there's a puddle, to less. It moves from warm spaces to cold spaces. So this time of the year, actually, it's fine that I don't have a vent in my bathroom, because I just open the window and that warm vapor from the shower is able to make its way out the window, no problem. In the summertime, actually, I do have a bit more humidity in the bathroom, and it doesn't move as easily as it does in the winter. So climate matters. What is the external, the outside of the house moisture levels that we're experiencing? And you see in Mississippi, particularly the southern part of Mississippi, we have a really hot, humid, nasty, it just feels gross most of the time. I grew up in Rankin County, which is really on the edge of the mixed humid and hot humid. It just could just be miserable down there. This part of the state's really quite a bit more pleasant, even though it may not feel like it to you, having lived on the southern side. It really is better up here. Let's see. Relative humidity was the next concept we wanted to discuss. Understanding relative humidity is water vapor in the air over water vapor air can hold at that temperature. That's the formula for relative humidity. So when you put a moisture meter on your house, or a hygrometer is the actual term. I got one basically that looks very similar to this. And y'all can come up here and look at any of this stuff on break. I just put it right above my thermostat in my house, so I'm tracking all the time. It's $8 at Lowe's, what the moisture is. And so in the summertime, it's not ideal to just ramp, from an energy efficiency perspective, it's not ideal to ramp up my air conditioner. But if my humidity gets too high, I know that I don't want mold growing in the house, so I just jack up the thermostat a little bit, or turn it down, and run the air conditioner a little more. Mold, hot weather, and air conditioning. Warm, humid weather, cool air conditioner, and vinyl wallpaper are a recipe for disaster as it relates to mold. I've already talked about the vinyl wallpaper. Get rid of it if you've got it. Encourage your families that you're working with. Get rid of the wallpaper. That's a relatively low cost fix and can make a big difference, particularly if that mold is living behind you. Cold weather and high indoor relative humidity leads to, what does that say? Condensation.
Or compensation.
Right. All right. So our goal, we've already said, is to have relative humidity of 40 to 60%. You can get up to 70% and be okay, but we want to try to keep it down at 60% or lower. And you see this chart actually shows not just the association with mold, but other illnesses. So this might be a helpful chart for you to think about, kind of cut out and put on your desk somewhere, so that you kind of can think about the importance of advising your families about relative humidity as it relates not just to mold, but to these other conditions and other issues. Look at that dust mite. Doesn't that look like fun? You need to keep your relative humidity less than 50% for dust mite control. For mold control, as we said, less than 70%. How are we doing on time? Let me just take a peek at where we're headed and think about what I'm going to cut out just a second, because I know we're not going to be able to cover everything in this module. So I'm gonna start zooming through this. We've got about, I think, 15 minutes before lunch gets here, is that right? Okay. Lots to cover. Mold myths, I've already said. Black mold, the notion that we need to test for black mold is a myth. Forget that. Mildew versus mold. Mildew actually is a type of mold. So if you see stuff growing in your shower and you think, oh, that's just mildew, well, it actually is mold. So be mindful of that. Try to get rid of it. And elbow grease is the best way. You can get some of the fancy cleaners in the store, but I wouldn't spend too much or get too much of the chemical-based stuff, because that's introducing other issues, the volatile organic compounds, and you want to be sure that you've eliminated that. People think bleach is the cure. You want to stay away from bleach because that's got those chemicals, those high, bleach just makes me feel awful, and it's a real challenge for us to keep it clean, because a lot of people think you just put the bleach on. We've got a lady that helps us in the house occasionally, and she thinks that she needs bleach if she sees mold, and no, not really. Just need a little more elbow grease. And so there's myths that are really hard to break. Testing is needed. We don't need to test. We can, you see it, you got it, and you just need to get rid of it. Guidelines for cleaning mold in homes. More information that you'll get. You're not going to be giving this level of information to a family, so we'll move through this fairly quickly. If you're hiring a pro, as I've said already, look for a state licensed remediation contractor or pro certified by these agencies. At the minimum, at the bare minimum, look for somebody that is licensed, bonded, insured, because that means they are committed to doing the right thing. They have to be. The minimum protection you need if you're going to be doing any significant mold remediation work, some of that you can do yourself, would be an N95 respirator. That's what this is. Don't try it on. We don't want to be contaminating each other, but you can come take a look at it. Or if you're looking for somebody, a professional, you would expect that they would come in all suited up like that person is for bigger jobs. The first step in mold cleanup is to isolate. You want to isolate and ventilate. Isolate the room. Turn off your HVAC, because if you don't, it's going to be sucking air up from the house and then disseminating those spores elsewhere. So be sure that you do that. Seal off the clean from the moldy area. Hang plastic around your home or around the room to keep the spores rather from moving about. Ventilate the outdoors. Have a fan aimed to the outside if you don't have a fan otherwise, and then consider the source of wetness and other contaminants. I'm going to encapsulate the mold, remove the porous materials that have been flooded, clean. Non-phosphate cleaners are important. Mold feeds off phosphates and cleaners, and so be sure that you're using non-phosphate cleaners. You just look at the ingredient list on the cleaners and look for that, and you're not going to see it advertised as non-phosphate. And disinfectants can be hazardous too. So this is like bleach. You don't want to use that. Alternatives would be alcohol, peroxide. If you're going to use bleach, there is a recipe. You need to follow the cleaning recipe on the bottle, which is about a half to a cup of bleach per gallon of water. Don't use straight bleach, particularly not straight concentrated bleach. That's just a recipe for another recipe for disaster. Well, we've got duplicate slides there, so we'll keep going. Remodel to reduce your risk. If you're doing remodeling anyway, be mindful of the types of shingles you're buying, or the importance of putting in your downspouts that help keep the water, move the water away from the house. You want to go at least 10 feet out from the house. Do more than restore. Use mold-resistant, mold flood hardy materials, which are not incredibly more expensive. I'm told that it's about a 10% increase on your cost to take a flood-resistant, water-resistant approach to remodeling, and it could be well worth your time and effort. in the future to do that. Flood hardy flooring, things like decorative concrete, ceramic, porcelain tiles, things that you can check out when you get the slides. Elevate your appliances and utilities, so don't keep them, the electronics particularly, on ground floor. Should there be a flood, you would lose them, so just elevate them slightly. Keep your electrical outlets elevated even more. You see in this picture here what I'm talking about, the wainscoting, that looks like that beadboard goes all the way up, but in a lot of cases you'll see sheetrock up here and a beadboard like that on the bottom that can then just be easily removed in the event of a flood. And that's particularly common for thoughtful contractors to do in laundry rooms or in bathrooms. So drainable flood hardy walls, that's what I'm talking about right here. You see that board across, what am I trying to say? Pop off baseboard and pop off moldings, make it easy to repair. So there's more information that you can get there. Another great resource, and of course Extension is always here and willing to help. For flood-related issues and moisture issues to look at would be the National Center for Healthy Housing, nchh.org. They've got some really nice materials. Another website to consider is EDEN, that's the Extension Disaster Education Network. If there's a flood, a significant flood in your community, you'll have responders coming in from all over, but families or friends or yourself, if you have a bathroom flood, you're not going to see Red Cross descending on your community. So don't underestimate the power of these sorts of resources for helping you even at your individual level if you've got a crisis. If your air conditioning, I mentioned my air conditioner is in the attic, and if I was to have a major flood from that not draining properly, I would need resources. I don't think I'm going to have federal agencies coming in to help, but I need to know where to go. So these are resources that I'd like for you to keep in mind. I wish we had time to do this activity, but this is a place for you to look, an activity for you to look at and consider where there are sources for moisture that could be addressed. Biological contaminants, pet dander is certainly something that we talk about and are concerned about. I've already said you're not going to get everybody to get rid of their animals that are in their home. Probably if I ask for a show of hands, I bet you a third or more of you have animals in the home, and that's okay. That's important for some people. But it's important that you also take an extra level of precaution in getting rid of the potential dander that's introduced from that or other contaminants. So here's some action steps that you can take and recommend to yourself, your family, your friends, the patients you're taking care of. Pests are certainly something that we bring in. Integrated pest management is an approach that is lunch here?
It's ready whenever you are.
All right, I will wrap up shortly. I want to take you through IPM, and then I will trust that you're going to review all these slides in great detail when you get them. I've been where you are, and I know better, but it's okay. Integrated pest management is a sustainable approach to manage pests that combines prevention, avoidance, and pest monitoring. So prevention, avoidance, and monitoring are the primary pieces that are associated with IPM. We just refer to it colloquially in the extension world is IPM. And so this is, you want to prevent, you want to exclude, you want to keep them from coming in. But if they do come in, know to call a licensed pest control agent. Please don't buy a Raid. Don't buy we're not trained to spray and to keep the roaches at bay. It seems like it may be cheaper to do that than it is to call a pest control, but it's really not that much money to get a quarterly contract and have them coming in, and that'll make such a difference. We do know that pests, and particularly rodents and the roaches and such, can be really hazardous for our health. The droppings that they leave behind can be a major source of problems for people with asthma. So it's important to control for them and take the appropriate steps to do that. So this is an interesting slide. Importance of landscape and healthy homes. If you've got vegetation touching your house, this is a way that pests can make their way into your home. So keep the the trimmings back, keep your trees and your shrubs trimmed. Even the best practices for landscape are to not put any flower beds right next to your house, but to have at least a 3-foot barrier. And you could put like rock or slag or some sort of granite, crushed granite, and then put your flower bed so that you don't have that direct contact vegetation with your house. Allows you to keep the animals away. Cockroaches are really just awful, and I know that y'all probably don't want to look at these before lunch, and so I'm going to just zoom through and let you remind you that these will be available for you to look at. Different types of roaches, and they do require different types of treatment. We're, again, not trained to know what those different types of treatment are. That's why it's important to rely on a pest control specialist. They do prefer to live anywhere in a home, near food, water, and also they need warmth. They need the same thing that humans need. They need food, they need water, they need shelter. And unfortunately, we are unwittingly providing those things for them. So it's back to this notion of keeping a home dry. Well, that's a pest management strategy too. If we can keep our home dry, we're preventing them from having one of the things that they need. Leaving food unsealed also is a way that invites roaches to live there. And then clutter. They like to have shelter. They don't like to be out in the open because they know we're out to get them. And we can keep our house decluttered. We're going to be in better shape. Actually, this is not the picture, but I got a picture. We did a workshop like this with builders and contractors at the Housing Authority in Canton, Mississippi. And the manager for that group of builders and contractors left immediately and went to do a home an inspection related to his already on his calendar. But he sent me pictures of the sink that he walked into, in the home that he walked into, and it looked almost identical to that. In addition to that, he sent me a picture of a big frying pan that the family cooked in over and over and over and over. And they just left that frying pan open with a big old pot of grease, and that's what they cooked their dinner. It had grease splattered everywhere. It was really awful. A lot of people don't know that this is a problem. So it's an opportunity for education. Bring those. You give the roaches they need, the food they need. They're going to stay in your home, and then they're going to, of course, leave their droppings, and they're going to slough off their scales and their body parts, and that's going to be more problematic air for us to consider. Ants are an issue. I'm going to move through the ants. Rodents, another major issue for us to be concerned with. Bed bugs. Oh my gosh, y'all, there is the funniest video. One of our faculty members, our state medical entomologist, actually Dr. Jerome Goddard, is the author of the book called Physician's Guide to Arthropods of Medical Importance, and he's written all these textbooks that medical schools use to teach this stuff. He's in Mississippi State. He was a guest on Stephen Colbert back in, it's been about 8 years ago, I think it was 2011, and talking about bed bugs. I need to be sure you get that link to share. You'll be rolling. It's so funny. They live in our bed. It's true. And Stephen Colbert makes this joke with Dr. Goddard, who is he's just real tight, uptight, kind of straight-laced guy. And Stephen Colbert says, so when we're in our bed doing our thing, they're in our bed doing their thing. And it just makes it gets all over him that he's on national television live, and it's being forced to better describe what bed bugs, how they live. But it's really quite educational, so I'll send you the link to that as well. Integrated pest management we've already talked about. Inspection, monitoring, non-chemical treatment methods is our first line of defense, unit preparation, and pesticides. I'd say the biggest thing on this is find a licensed pest control person if your efforts to exclude them from your home are not working. It's a really great practice just to have that quarterly or more inspection. So this is all coming your way. The three-legged stool here of no food, no water, no habitat. The clutter you see before and after as a way of addressing control. Oh, and I think we're done for now.